Dr. Nielsen, Dr. Brad, thanks so much for joining me on the Mark the Mind Show. Super nice to meet you, sir.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's great to meet you too. Great to be here.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I appreciate your persistence. I think you first sent me your book, The Emotion Code, about a year and a half ago. And then I got a follow-up letter, and then I think I got a few emails from you. I was like, man, you are really persistent. And it wasn't coming from a PR or marketing firm. Like, you're doing this yourself. Right? So hoo-yah to you, sir.
Well, yeah, I really wanted to get on your show.
Here we are. I'm excited to talk about it because, I don't know if you know anything about my work, but I'm a big proponent of emotional development. And emotional development is something that's near and dear to the work that we do at Unbeatable Mind. So I'm excited to get into it. But I really like to, before I get into like content stuff, I like to really get deep into what shaped you. What's your origin story? Where did you grow up, and what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you get interested in becoming a doctor of chiropractic, and then really get into the emotional development side?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it was an interesting thing. My journey has been interesting. It started out at age 7. Actually, I was really sick with the measles, and my folks had made a bed for me on a couch in the living room so I could be near their bedroom. Mm-hmm. And this particular night, everybody else had gone to bed. And I had overheard my parents talking, and I knew the plan. The plan was I was going into the hospital the next day, and I was going into something called an oxygen tent. It was the first time I'd heard that expression. I didn't know what an oxygen tent was. The tent part sounded kind of interesting, but because I was 7, but I was really sick, way too sick to think about camping. And my folks, after everybody had gone to bed, my folks came into the room. And I remember this like it happened yesterday, Mark. My mother said to my father, honey, will you kneel down with me and say a prayer for our boy so he'll be able to get well? So they did. Now, knowing my dad wasn't a preacher or anything like that. He was in real estate and construction. But I think they were really worried about me. I was really sick. And I'm lying there just feeling really nauseated and feverish and just really ill. So my dad starts offering this prayer. It's probably the first time in my life I'd heard my dad pray. And in the middle of this short prayer, something amazing happened. Something miraculous happened, really. This change began at the top of my head, and it went through my body to the soles of my feet, and I was made completely well. Now, it's impossible to describe this really, but I remember this like it happened yesterday, and it was quite a while ago now. But anyway, I held my tongue till my dad was done praying, which didn't take long, and when he was done, I said, I'm better. And they said, yeah, that's fine. Go back to sleep. Tomorrow you're going in the hospital.
That's incredible.
But the next day proved it to everybody that I really was totally well. So that taught me 2 really important things that shaped my life. One of those things was that there is a higher power that we can draw upon for help, right? And the other thing was that healing doesn't necessarily have to take a long time, because I've experienced it happening instantaneously, right? So then what happened was, fast forward about another 7 years, and I ended up with kidney disease. And I get these terrific pains in the back that would just knock me to the ground or take my breath away. And it was very scary. My folks took me to the hospital, and they ran all these tests. And my parents were told, your son has kidney disease, and it's about a 50-50 chance whether he'll pull through this or not. There's nothing we can do. At the time, they didn't do heart transplants or kidney transplants or anything else. So my kidneys were fighting for their life, and if they died, that was it for me. So, but they didn't have anything to offer really. And so my parents were open to alternatives, and they took me to see some old-time osteopathic doctors that operated out on the edge of town in a trailer house in the middle of a wheat field.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that's fringe. That's real fringe.
Yeah, they were very fringe. But I can remember sometimes we'd pull up and a busload of people would pull away. Wow. Sometimes people in other states would charter buses to come and visit these too, because they were really healers. So they started working on me, and right away my body started responding. And within about 3 weeks, I didn't have any more pain or anything at all. And right away they had started to become less severe and less frequent. And my folks took me back to the hospital after I didn't have any pain anymore. And they were told, well, it's a spontaneous remission. Whatever we did must have worked, I guess. But I knew that these people had helped me. So I knew that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to be a healer. And so I would talk to them. I can remember lying on my back on their table, looking up at them and saying, when I grow up, I want to do what you guys are doing. And they were very discouraging. They'd say, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because they said, if you go to chiropractic school or some school of natural healing, you'll come out of there like a zombie. You won't even be able to think for yourself. Your head will be so full of fixed ideas that, it'll be pointless. So that really sunk in.
Do you remember what they did? Like what was it that
they were did? Mainly just realigning my spine.
Really?
Yeah. Just manipulating my vertebrae and realigning things. They said that I had a bone down in my lower thoracics that had gotten out of alignment, and that bone being out of alignment was irritating the nerves traveling to the kidneys. And they did some other things too. But that was the main thing. And so I thought they were chiropractors for years. When the osteopathic profession was made an offer, they kind of couldn't refuse, back I think in the early 60s by the medical profession. Essentially, we'll make you medical doctors too, because it was kind of a competition thing, and they were presenting competition. So now pretty much if you go to a DO, it's pretty much like seeing an MD, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they decided they didn't want to have anything to do with that, so they just moved into a trailer house in the middle of a wheat field.
So you mean they didn't go back to get formally certified or licensed as a DO? They just said, "Screw it, we're going to do our own thing."
Yeah, they just stayed out of it. So then what happened was I got involved in computers. I took a computer class in 1980 in Hawaii. Actually, I was going to school there, and man, I was hook, line, and sinker. I was a goner for computers, and I became a computer programmer. I had a business back in the early 80s, right, when people would buy an IBM PC and there'd be no software for it. I'd go into their business. I had a business called the Computer Tutor, which I thought was really clever. And I'd go in and I'd look at all their flows, and then I'd write some really simple software so they could use this thing. And that's what I did. And I thought I'd do that or something like that for the rest of my life. And then one day, my wife and I went home to Montana as we were going to college. And I went home to Montana, and my dad, totally out of the blue, asks me this question. In fact, I was about 6 months away from going into the MBA program at BYU. And my dad, totally out of the blue, says, hey, he said, you've always wanted to go into chiropractic, and it seems like a great career. And I said, well, no, I'm going this other direction. I'm going to get my MBA and be in computers and things. And he said, well, why don't you think about it one more time? So I did. And having learned at that early age that you could get help, all of a sudden, when he had asked me that question, suddenly I felt like I was back right in the middle of the fence, and I could go into chiropractic or get my MBA, and I didn't know what to do now. So that night I prayed about this, and that night I had this experience. I was awakened 3 different times, and each time that I was awakened, I would find my mind full of all these warm, fuzzy, happy thoughts about healing and helping people. Thoughts of service, and I thought, oh, that's great, yeah, but the new IBM PC has got a 4 megahertz processor. And I'd fall back asleep, right? So that's how that went.
That's so classic. Such a yin-yang juxtaposition there.
It's such a nerd.
The right path or the left path.
And so, anyway, so the next day, I still don't know what to do. So that night I prayed again. And the second night, I had this really amazing experience where I was awakened 3 times again. But each time that I was awakened, it was the same thoughts of service and healing and helping people naturally. But each time that on the second night, it happened 3 times, but each time was exponentially more powerful than the time before. So that on the 3rd time that I was awakened on the second night, it was the thoughts of service to mankind and humanity and the whole world. I mean, it was absolutely overwhelming. And right then, as I'm feeling that overwhelming feeling, I have this voice that speaks to me, and it says, this is a sacred calling. And I thought, okay, I get it. And so I went to chiropractic school, and because I was a computer programmer, Before I was always trying to use a computer in the work that I was doing. So I always had a computer there. So as I would find things that worked for people, I would record them in this database that I was building, this knowledge base, really. And I figured, God's gotten me into this, maybe he'll help me. And so I had this habit, just this silent habit, just a momentary pause, really. I never told anybody that I was actually pausing and asking for help for them. But I think that when you ask for help, two things happen. You're humbling yourself and admitting that you maybe need help, but also you're opening that conduit, because when you ask, you receive, right?
Right.
And so there were times, Mark, during those years when somebody would come in to see me, I didn't know how to help them, or didn't know how to approach their problem, and I would have that momentary pause and ask for help. There were times when, in response to that asking, that information would just flood in like an avalanche of data. Really amazing. That didn't happen very often, but once in a while. So gradually I was able to put together this database. And one of the fascinating things that I learned really was that, and in fact, the whole basis for the emotion code and the body code is this understanding that we have a conscious mind, which is where we spend all of our waking hours. When we go to sleep, the conscious mind shuts down, and we have a subconscious mind, right? And it's the subconscious mind that's creating millions of new cells every minute and keeping everything going. But that subconscious mind is essentially a binary computer. Now, what that means is, if you think about your phone, what's the interface? Well, it's the screen in your finger, and the laptop I'm sitting at, it's got a screen, it's got a keyboard, that's the interface. But the subconscious mind has a different interface. It's a binary interface, which means the subconscious mind will give you answers if you ask questions that can be answered with a yes or a no. And it can manifest those answers in different ways. We use muscle testing, and so I was able to start asking questions of my patients. And I found that it worked incredibly well. And during the last 10 years of my practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no hope for them at all. They were never going to get well. And yet the vast majority of them got well, because I was able to ask the true source, their subconscious, what they really needed. And so that's really where the emotion code came from.
You're familiar with Dr. David Hawkins' work, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, power versus force. In fact, I reference him in the Emotion Code. So I left practice in 2004 and wrote this book, The Emotion Code. And the reason for that was because what I found in practice was that all of my patients, no matter how young or old they were, no matter what they were suffering from, if they were dealing with depression or anxiety or phobias or panic attacks or PTSD or eating disorders or some kind of self-sabotage, or if they were dealing with some physical thing like infertility or asthma or digestive disorders, or if they'd been diagnosed with some kind of a disease process, or if they were dealing with physical pain, which was a lot of people, they all had something in common, and that was their emotional baggage. And I came to understand that it took me a while to figure this out, because what happens to us, if you think about the body itself, our bodies ultimately, if you zoom in with a big microscope on some part of your body, like your hand, and you zoom in past the cells and past the organelles and past the molecules and down to the level of the atom, well, you'd notice there's another atom and it's a long distance away. And if you look inside the atom, you see, hey, there's nothing in here. It's just empty space, right? And energy. So that's really what we are. Well, when you're feeling a certain emotion, like anger or resentment or fear or whatever, on a quantum level, what's going on is that you're experiencing the vibration that's unique to that emotion. So all emotions have their own frequency. Right. And so if an emotion's coming up for you and you stuff that emotion, you don't want to feel it, or if an emotion comes up for you and you enhance it and you become really upset and you volumize that feeling, those two circumstances can result in what I like to call an emotional loop that's kind of stuck open. Normally, when we feel an emotion, we allow it to be felt, and then we allow that loop to close, and that experience is over. But sometimes that loop gets stuck open, and so the energy that was being felt in the body, that energy can become trapped in the body. So we call these trapped emotions. And it's amazing the effect that they have on us, and how they affect us not only physically, but they're there in every disease process that I have seen in 35 years. There's always an emotional component, right. Trapped emotions. And in all those other situations I talked about, all those other problems, PTSD, depression, so on, physical pain, 90% of all the physical pain we have is from trapped emotions.
Right.
How
much do you think those trapped emotions are from childhood trauma versus maybe some adult experience?
It depends on how traumatic your childhood was. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I mean, some people have really, really difficult experiences as a kid, being bullied or being abused in all kinds of ways. And when you go through that, you definitely develop emotional baggage that then distorts the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And that's really what trapped emotions do. They affect us in a couple of ways. In fact, let me tell you a story. There was many years ago, there was a guy that came in to see me. He had really severe low back pain. I mean, it's like a 9, close to a 10 on a 0 to 10 scale. And so first thing, I started asking questions of his subconscious mind, muscle testing him for the responses, right? And what I find is that he has a trapped emotion. And we use a chart that looks like this. It's got 60 emotions on it in the emotion code. It's divided up into 2 columns and 6 rows. And right away, I find the emotion is anger. And testing a little further, I find that this occurred 20 years before. And he says, "Oh yeah, I know what happened. I know what that's all about." And I said, "What happened?" He said it was a work situation where he was wrongfully accused, basically, of like embezzling or cooking the books. And he was furious about it because he was totally clean, but he was, wrongfully accused. So I don't blame him for being upset. But what happened was that emotional feeling of anger was so powerful that loop, that emotional experience did not get processed. And so that energy was still there. So if you can imagine, this guy's got a ball of energy, and a trapped emotion's a ball of energy. You can't see them, but they're about the size of a baseball, about the size of a softball. So this is in his low back, lodges in his low back. These can lodge anywhere in the body. It just happened to lodge there. So 20 years later, he's in my office, and he's talking to me about how he probably is going to need to have surgery, right? But that's his next step. I'm his last resort. But I find this trapped emotion, and to release these trapped emotions, we just swipe a few times down the governing meridian, which runs right, up the middle of the back. Swipe down that meridian a few times to release that energy, and the pain goes from about a 9, 9.5 to a 0 instantly. And can't believe it. And he's bending over and twisting and turning and exclaiming. And I was grateful that it worked so well. This is not unusual with the emotion code. Physical pain. See, what was happening in this guy's case was that he had this ball of anger in his low back. And you have to understand, I mean, we have to get out of the Newtonian world and move into the quantum world to understand how this stuff's possible. But he's got this ball of anger in his low back from 20 years before. And what's it doing?
Why did it settle in his lower back?
Yeah, I don't know. These can settle anywhere. He might have had a little bit of a pre-existing injury there, maybe, or maybe it was about money. And oftentimes low back, money issues will tend to manifest there. Right. So you never know where they're going to lodge. But anyway, this energy was distorting the normal energy field of his body for 20 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, when you distort the energy field of the body, you're interfering with the chemical reactions to a degree, with the blood flow, the lymph flow, the flow of meridian energy, all those things. And so it's not unusual for people to have pain. So he's got this severe pain, but the moment we release that energy, it's gone. But that's not the end of the story. What happened was it was 2 or 3 days later, I think it was 3 days later, he came back in to see me for a follow-up. And I'll never forget this. He said, "Dr. Nelson, he said, my back still doesn't hurt at all." He said, "I can't believe it. It's just like kind of miraculous." But he said, "I have to talk to you." He said, "When I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about." He said, "For as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you'd call a rageaholic." he said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids, and I got to watch the road rage. And I've been to anger management a couple times, hasn't really helped me. But he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger from me, I feel like a different person. He said, things that used to set me off don't set me off anymore. He said, I just feel kind of relaxed and kind of peaceful. He said, how did you do that? How does that work? And I said, I don't know.
I don't know. That's my scientific.
Because I didn't know.
That's awesome. Hey, I'm curious, like, if he had gone to surgery, would they have found anything down there? Would surgery have done anything for him? I mean, what are they going to find?
Well, you know, you think about it in a case like that, and you see, when you have a trapped emotion, remember, if you can imagine, he had this ball of anger in his low back, distorting the energy field and interfering with the normal tissues. Surgery wouldn't have gotten rid of that.
Yeah.
So now he would have a more compromised back, but he would still have the energy there from whatever he'd been through 20 years before, from, you know, being falsely accused, et cetera. The anger was still there. And so now he'd have a back that had been operated on, that had been sliced and diced, and that was trying to heal. And now he's still got that energy there, see? So, I mean,
but was there a physical manifestation that they saw, like on an X-ray or an MRI, that caused them to say you need surgery, or were they just recommending that based on pain?
His next step was actually to go and be evaluated for surgery because he was in so much pain. Right. The thing about it, though, is that what these trapped emotions do is they interfere with the normal balance of the muscles. They interfere with misalignment. Okay, they can create misalignment in bones and in other tissues of the body. So what I found was that it was the number one most common thing that I needed to work on for all of my patients, no matter what it was that they were dealing with. And I had lots and lots of patients with back pain. I mean, in about 18 years, I only had to send 2 patients out for surgery for low back because it had gone too far and they had herniated discs in their low back. But otherwise, people were able to get well. So this really should be the first thing people do, is see if there's some emotional baggage causing the pain or contributing, and then last resort surgery. I mean, you know, even the medical profession, the AMA came out with a study back in, I think, in 1978, where they found that it's like between 70 and 80% of all the back surgeries that were done then could have been prevented and weren't necessary.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. That's still going on.
So I'm curious, use kinesiology, this muscle testing. Is that something that individuals, or can you teach individuals to test themselves?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we do.
'Cause that was I've always been curious about that. I mean, Hawkins makes that claim that, you know, you can teach you to test yourself. I think, you know, they use like the finger test.
Yeah. The ring and ring method is a great method. You can also, there's a lot of other methods. There's the flick method, where you can, you know, you make a ring and then on a yes, the ring will stay together, and on a no, it'll break open.
Okay.
Yeah. There's lots of different methods.
What's the secret to asking the right questions?
Well, you know, there are a couple things. First of all, with self-testing, there are a couple of mistakes that people make. One of the most common mistakes is that people think it's kind of a strength contest, but it's not.
Right. It's not.
In fact, I used too much strength. The main method that I used for testing years ago when I was in practice was this one, where you put one finger on top of another one. Mm-hmm. The bottom finger will stay strong for yes and weaken for no. And man, that one was hard on me. My fingers hurt for 7 years. And I finally realized, gee, maybe I should back off on the amount of resistance I'm using.
Right.
So now, like, for example, when I do this test, we teach people that the amount of force that you use for these rings. Yeah, you make a ring and a ring.
Yeah, ring finger and thumb touching, but interlock with the other finger.
Yeah.
Pull them.
And most people use way too much strength, see?
Right.
And so they're fighting against themselves. What you're trying to do is you're trying to pick up, you're trying to sense this subtle change that's taking place in the body. So you'd want to only use, probably less than 1% of your total available strength, see?
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's very, very light. In fact, what I tell people is if you found a ladybug in your house and you picked it up and you're going to carry it out to your garden and let it go, how much force would you use? Not much, right? So that's about how much you can use for these. Another thing is that it's really important to realize that your subconscious mind knows how to do this kind of testing. And so if you think about someone who can type, can you type, Mark? You type very fast?
Faster than most of my peers, because I actually took typing way back in high school, 1970s.
Me too, yeah. Back when they offered it. They probably don't offer it anymore. It's a lost art. Right. But if you talk to somebody that's typing along, maybe they're typing 80 or 90 or 100 words a minute, they'll tell you that if they start thinking about what their fingers are doing, they immediately crash and burn. They start making all kinds of mistakes and so on. As long as they aren't focused on what their fingers are doing, they're able to keep typing and maintain a high rate of speed. It's the same thing with self-muscle testing. If you're focusing on your fingers, it doesn't work very well. But if you allow the test to take place slightly out of your focus, then it works better.
Mm-hmm. So can you walk me through like a little case study? So I just walk into your office and I say, Dr. Nielsen, I've got this pain in my upper back near my kind of right shoulder blade.
Yeah, sure.
And so how would you walk me through that?
Do you actually have pain in your shoulder blade?
No, but I don't know. Maybe you can come up with a better case study.
I can work on you. Well, no, I can show you how this works remotely. If you got anything going on that you want to maybe have addressed.
Oh, that's funny because I don't. I'm kind of like the beacon
Pretty good
of
shape.
Health out here in California. At least I like to think I am.
Good, yeah, that's fine. Well, basically, the way this would work, and first of all, I haven't been in practice for a long time. I just travel around the world and teach and do podcasts and things. But basically, how the emotion code works is if I were there with you, okay, and let's say you do have pain in your shoulder blade or maybe a migraine or whatever, what we would do is
my son has migraines, by the way, so that is something that he suffers. So that's probably a good one to start with.
Yeah, sure. Well, so basically, what I would do first of all, if I were there with you or with him, I'd have him hold out his arm parallel to the floor, and I would have him make a statement. What's your son's name?
Devin.
Devin. Okay, I would have him say, "My name is Devin." Mm-hmm. And then if I were to press down on his outstretched arm, he should be strong and able to resist that. Mm-hmm. And then I'd have him say something that's incongruent, like I'd have him say, "My name is Bob." And then if I press down on his arm, he would weaken. Mm-hmm. And you can try this. Your viewers, your listeners can try this. It's really, it's interesting. And I think, it goes along with everything that Hawkins learned about the subconscious mind, can't really lie very well. It wants to tell the truth.
Right.
And so then what I would do with your son is I would simply ask, using the emotion code, I would ask, is there a trapped emotion that we can release that's contributing to your migraine headache? Mm-hmm. And we would probably get a yes answer. In other words, the muscle test would be strong. So then what we would do is we'd look at the list and then we would ask, okay, is the emotion in column A or column B?
Okay.
And the way that works is, you see, his subconscious mind would know exactly what emotion that is at that moment. When we ask that question, do you have a trapped emotion we can release is contributing to your headache? If he's got one, the subconscious mind will instantly identify it. And then all we have to do is play charades with his subconscious to figure out what it is. Mm-hmm. So we would ask, is this emotion in column A on our chart here? And maybe that would be weak, a no. So that means it's in column B. So then we would ask, well, all right, is it in an odd row or an even row? So is it an odd row in column B? And maybe the answer is no. So that way we know, okay, well, we've narrowed it down. It's got to be in 2 or 4 or 6 in column B. So then we ask, is it in row 2 in column B? Is it in row 4? Maybe it's in row 4, column B. So we get a yes answer. So then what we do is we've got 5 emotions in that cell: depression, frustration, indecisiveness, panic, or taken for granted. So then what we do is we test those. Well, is it depression? Is it frustration? Is it indecisiveness? And one of those might go weak, or sorry, one of those might be strong, and test strong for that. And then that way we've identified the emotion. And then what we can do is we can ask, okay, once we've identified the emotion, The next question is, do we need to know more about this? Because you see, in order for the subconscious mind to be willing to close the loop on an emotional experience so that it's actually completely finished, sometimes it needs you to dig a little deeper. So you might need to know, like, let's say maybe we find the emotion of panic on your son, and we ask, do we need to know more about this? And the answer comes back strong. Then we might ask, well, okay, how old is your son right now?
24.
24. So we might ask, okay, did this happen earlier than age 20? Yeah, maybe it did. Earlier than 10? Maybe that's a no. Okay, did it happen around 11 or 12, 13? Okay, 13 years old. Maybe it's panic at age 13. And he might all of a sudden say, oh yeah, I know what happened, right? Or he might say, well, it doesn't really ring a bell. Either way. But we would then ask that same question again, do we need to know any more? And once we get a no answer to that question, do we need to know more? At that point, we can go ahead and release the emotional energy, okay? And we do that by just taking a hand or a magnet and just swiping down the middle of the back a few times, 3 times. Sometimes we inherit emotion. So we might find, let's say we're taking to column B, row 4, and we ask about all 5 of those emotions, and they're all weak. So we get a weak muscle response in every one of those. That would mean that we're dealing with an emotion that is inherited, that he would have received at the moment of conception from you or from your wife, or his mom. And so then that's an interesting one, because then we have to ask, is this an inherited emotion? And then we can find out, because the subconscious mind remembers, we could find out, who it came from. And let's say he got it from you and you got it from your dad, and it goes back 10 generations or something. We can find all that out because the subconscious mind somehow knows all of that. And then you can release emotions like that as well that are inherited. And it's a fascinating thing because, we're all not only the product of our own lives and our own experiences and our own traumas and difficulties, but also in many cases also the traumatic experiences and the difficult emotional things that our ancestors went through.
So true.
Yeah. So there's a way to find those and get rid of those too.
What's the role of belief of the patient in this? Let's say my son, let's say I had to drag him in by his ear, and he's like, whatever, Dad, take him to this crazy thing. I don't believe in that stuff. Just trust me. Does he have to believe? Does your patient have to believe?
Well, it works better if there is some level of belief, but it can still work regardless. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people who were really skeptical, but then all of a sudden they see that it works. Usually what I like to do, what we recommend for our practitioners, we've certified about 12,000 people now in about 80 countries or so around the world as Emotion Code practitioners. And we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other people that are using it on friends and family members, and that's fine. But we have a lot of people who have decided they want to really master it, and then a lot of them do it for a living. But what we tell them is, if you're trying to work with somebody that's really negative about it, it's going to be more difficult. A lot of people aren't open. It happens all the time that people will come to me and they'll say things like, my husband, I really want to work on him, but he's just so not into this, and he just really thinks it's completely idiotic and so on, and it's just bogus. And my advice to them is usually, well, he's where he's at right now, and it may take some time for him to come around. One of the things that you can do to help someone to understand, because we're so stuck in Newtonian physics, really, and in chemical medicine and so on, and surgical medicine, we have to step into this new world. I mean, Einstein said, the future of medicine is going to be based on frequencies, and that's really what this is. So it's really energy medicine. But what you can do for somebody is, I tell people, hey, get your husband a copy of the Emotion Code book, let him read it, or get him a copy, get it for him on audio so he can listen to it as he's driving around. And it all makes sense, and it all, true things usually make sense, right, Mark? Yeah. And this all makes sense, but it's definitely different from Doan's pills and things like that. It's pretty far away from that.
Fortunately, a lot of that, this what used to be kind of sloughed off as new agey thinking is finally gaining some mainstream acceptance, which is good. I'm curious, we've spoken mostly about the physical manifestation of a trapped emotion, but what if it's nothing physical shows up? For instance, like I talk freely about this on this podcast, but I grew up in a fairly traumatic environment myself, a lot of alcohol, a lot of abuse. And I was extraordinarily physical person and very healthy. Been meditating since I was 21 and have tons of great practices. So, I haven't had any physical manifestation of that, but there have been other issues, right? Patterns, what the psychology profession would call shadows issues.
Sure.
So how do we, is this effective, especially if, shadow is largely hidden. That's why they call it shadow. It's largely hidden from view of the individual, but it might be completely overt, let's say, to a partner.
Yeah.
So how would you address that if like, let's say a spouse came to you and said, Brad, my husband is a rageaholic, but he's not completely unaware of it. What can you do to help him?
Well, trapped emotions are huge drivers of our behaviors.
Absolutely.
And so, by finding and removing the emotional energy in the body that's trapped, gradually what starts to happen is people start to feel like a different kind of a person. They start to feel different. They start to, at a certain point, it's almost like stepping out of this old suit you've been walking around in into this different person who is really who you were originally intended to be. Because we end up, you can think of everybody that you know as dragging these suitcases behind them through life, and the suitcases contain all their emotional baggage, and it's rocks from being bullied, and it's rocks from being abused, and divorces and things like that, and people that they've lost, and combat, and all kinds of things. And so with the emotion code, what we do is we basically just start to pull the rocks out of those suitcases. And then pretty soon the suitcases aren't even needed anymore. And so it's like cutting yourself loose from all of that. And you start to feel lighter and you start to ascend. But because the subconscious mind knows all of it and remembers all of it, it remembers every split second of your life, it knows exactly what emotional baggage you have. And it knows exactly, what needs to be done next. And so you don't have to have physical symptoms. If you do, it's nice to find the emotions behind that and get rid of those. And that's a nice way to demonstrate it. But
it's almost easier because you can target it a little bit more quickly, probably.
Yeah, but with the emotion code, basically, it's actually really simple. Let's say there's a couple different ways you can do it. One way is that let's say that there was a certain event that happened in your life that you remember, and it was traumatic for you. Well, what you can do is you can ask questions about that. Do you have any trapped emotions? Do you have a trapped emotion we can release that was that resulted from that event? Maybe you do, and if you do, then we use the same process: column A, column B. We figure it out and release it. Maybe another way that you can find these is you can ask about a certain person. Okay. Like, for example, do you have any trapped emotions about your dad or your mom or your uncle or, whatever? And the subconscious mind knows all of those. The average person has probably around 300 or so. When you get to our age, you probably got about 300 or so trapped emotions. Some people have more, some people have less. But starting to find those and get rid of those is such a critical step to really finding peace in your life and really being happy. And
now, have you discovered any kind of like meta question that can release all 300 at once?
Yeah, I wish we could do that. I've tried.
Someday, yeah, I'm sure we have.
Yeah.
How many? What's the role of therapy? How many therapists have found the emotion code to be a useful tool? Because you're not really talking about context so much. You're just releasing the energy.
Yeah,
I think changing the context, of understanding around the event, is also, that's traditional therapeutic process.
Sure, absolutely. And cognitive therapy is something that helps a lot of people. We have a lot of therapists out of the 12,000 people that have become certified in the Emotion Code, there's a percentage of those that are that have been traditional therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists that have found that hypnotherapists and so on, that have found that this is really incredibly powerful. In fact, some of them have told me that this is all they do now.
Interesting.
Because
I'm also curious just about how or whether there's a relationship between this and EMDR, the eye motion dissociation processing, or whatever it is, eye motion.
Yeah.
Forget what the D stands for.
It's eye movement desensitization.
Desensitization processing, right?
Yeah. Well, I think they're definitely related. I think that there's some connections there. The nice thing about the Emotion Code is that you can learn the whole entire process right from the book and do it yourself effectively right from the book. And
that's extraordinary.
Yeah,
and you have people express success from that. I mean, like it's probably not as easy as having a coach, but
all the time. Yeah, I mean, we have well over 10,000 really unsolicited testimonials from people all over the world. People are finding that it works. Let me tell you one of my favorite stories. Just to give you an idea, we were at an event and this woman told us that she had started reading the Emotion Code and listening to it, and her son started reading it and listening to it. And he started practicing with his friends, and she thought it was kind of cute. A couple of weeks go by, and then she gets a phone call. And the woman that's calling her tells her that she's the mother of one of her son's friends. And she said, I have to talk to you. She said, my son has had a phobia of water all of his life. You know, you can have a phobia to anything. He had a phobia to water. She said, it's been very disruptive to his life and to our life as a family. We've tried everything to fix him. We've taken him to all kinds of people. Nothing has ever worked. She said, right now I'm at the community pool. She said, my son is out splashing around, playing in the water with the other boys for the first time in his life. She said, your son did this to him. She said, how is this even possible? What in the world is he doing? And those two boys are only 11 years old, see?
No kidding.
So he learned it from the book and then fixed his friend.
That's a great
there's
story.
Hope. There's hope for humanity, Mark.
There is hope for humanity. I'm with you on that. We're going to wrap up soon, but you came out with a body code in February. So what's different?
Well, the body code it's another book. Looks like this. And what happened was really the beginning of this was in 2008. The Emotion Code book came out in 2007. And then about a year later, one morning I woke up and my mind was full of instruction. And the instruction was, you need to take everything that you've learned about natural healing and put it into a self-study course that anyone can learn and make it available to everyone, everywhere. And I remember thinking, are you sure about this?
That sounds like a lot of work.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. So, and it took a whole year to put the first version of it together. But now it's an app that you can download online. And the idea there, it's also a book. The book is really the manual for the body code system that you can get online, in the App Store and Google Play. But basically, here's the idea. When I was in practice, I learned that there are really 6 different kinds of imbalances that cause all of our problems.
Okay.
And those are things like, like energetic imbalances, like trapped emotions. There are imbalances in the circuitry and systems of the body, disconnections between the spirit and the physical, and so on. Toxins, nutrition and lifestyle imbalances, like not getting enough certain vitamins and minerals. There are misalignments, and then there are pathogens. And so during all those years when I was in practice, having a computer right there, I was able to build this really massive knowledge base. And what I found was that the subconscious minds of my patients knew what was in that knowledge base. So I could ask questions and they would take me right to wherever I needed to go. And so it worked so well that during the last 10 years of my practice, most of the people that I worked with had been told there was really no hope for them at all. And yet, the vast majority of them were able to get well. And so basically what we can do is we can ask, all right, you've got some kind of a problem, for example. Is there an underlying reason for it? And if the subconscious mind says yes, we just ask, okay, where's the reason? And the subconscious will give us one reason at a time. And so is the reason on the left side or the right side? And so, maybe you're taken to section 1, energies. And you can actually use the book this way, and you can find imbalances and fix those. So let's say that on the next page you're taken here, and there are page numbers for these. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so let's say maybe you're taken to physical trauma right here. Well, a physical trauma, that's one of the things. Just to give you an idea, there's a lot of stuff in here that you're not going to find anywhere else. But just to give you an idea how that particular one came about, there was a guy that came in to see me many years ago, 42 years old, been in a car accident 4 years before. His neck still hurt like the day after the accident. He'd seen multiple doctors. And I thought, that's kind of odd. So before I worked on him, my habit was to ask for help from up above, right? And so I said, Father, if there's more I need to know about this, help me to understand this, because this seems a little bit unusual. And this answer flooded in. And check this out, Mark. Here's what the answer was, okay? This guy was in an auto accident. He was rear-ended, right? And even at a slow collision, you can have hundreds of tons of kinetic energy released.
Right.
Well, that kinetic energy went into the vehicle, crumpled the fenders, bent the frame. Some of that energy went through his body. He ended up with whiplash. But the answer that I got was that some of that energy that was created in that accident had become lodged in his neck. And that was the answer. And I thought, whoa, that's weird. So energy from the accident 4 years ago still in his neck? So I swiped a few times down his back to release that physical trauma energy. And then I said, okay, move your neck around. So he looks like this and he says, wow, how'd you do that? And I said, well, how does it feel? He said, well, it's like a 2. And I said, well, when's the last time it was a 2? And he said, well, before the accident, it was a 9 when it started. So that's just one thing. Wow. But there's all kinds of things in here that you can actually find. And you can do this yourself. And so it's time for us, you see, to start taking back our own ability to work on our own bodies and work on our own kids. I mean, there's so much that we can do. There will always be a need for Western medicine, but most of the time we don't need drugs, and most of the time we don't need surgery.
You should be last resort.
We can do ourselves.
That's awesome. Really applaud your work. That's fascinating. And can you get? You have the audiobooks. Is it?
Yeah,
can
they're
you
both
get
on audio. Audible.
Gist of it through the audiobooks, or would you need the physical book to kind of like for self care?
Well, it's a good question. I think a lot of people love the audiobooks. We have handouts that go along with the audiobooks. So either way, it depends on what you like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think ideally, what I like to do usually is I'll often get the book on audio so I can listen to it, and then get the book physically so I can take notes
work
and
with
things.
It, right? That's more of a tool. To wrap up, like where can people learn more about your work? And I know the books and stuff, you'll find them on Amazon probably, but where would they go to like really connect with you?
Our website is at discoverhealing.com. Mm-hmm. And we've got we have a map of practitioners all over the world. If you're looking for somebody to do this for you, we've got information about certification there. We have all kinds of info there, lots of testimonials. So that's the best place to go, discoverhealing.com.
Discoverhealing.com. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks for having me on. Bye-bye.
Booyah.